So, I just got to watch the new documentary on Peacock about Bray Wyatt, aka Wyndham Rotunda, the man that played the character of Bray Wyatt on WWE television, a professional wrestler who unfortunately passed away late last year. It was one of the most heartbreaking and gut-wrenching moments in the history of WWE, pro wrestling, the whole world, something akin to when Eddie Guerrero passed away. And now we have a brand new documentary narrated by The Undertaker and following the life of Bray Wyatt from start to today, essentially, with the family. And I haven't really talked a lot about professional wrestling on this channel, but I am a very, very big fan of the entire industry. I absolutely love it. If you follow me here, you know what I talk about. I talk about storytelling. I love writing, storytelling, characters, so of course I am attracted to the world of professional wrestling because it is essentially this medium of artistry and storytelling that I love. I don't care if it's movies, TV, video games, or wrestling. If you're telling good stories, I am here for it, and wrestling is no different. And I watched this documentary, and it had just a very big effect on me personally, and just the way it was made, I thought it was beautiful, so I want to give my 2 cents, my review of it here, and I want to recommend it to everybody, even if you don't like wrestling. And I wanted an excuse to talk about Bray Wyatt and professional wrestling in general, and maybe even WrestleMania, which is this weekend, which is exciting. So the documentary starts off as we're following Bray Wyatt as he was a young kid, going into high school. We're introduced to his family, the fact that his father was Mike Rotunda, a famous professional wrestler, and his brother, of course, his younger brother, is Bo Dallas, another famous professional wrestler. We find out how he essentially made his way to the WWE and became this professional artist style of wrestler, somebody who wasn't all about the in-ring professional wrestling stuff, but became this extremely creative and inventive character. If you don't know, Bray Wyatt was this supernatural-esque character in the WWE world. He was creepy, he was different, he was just so ambitious when it came to what this character was doing on screen and how it actually translated to the WWE ring. And it was all made possible because of Wyndham Rotunda, this guy who is not only talented in ring, he can actually wrestle, put on great matches. Not only is he talented on the mic, he's one of the best promo cutters, one of the best actors in WWE history, but he is just a genius of monumental proportions. The man came up with the original Bray Wyatt character, who was this almost a cult leader, this kind of Jim Jones swamp leader, just he led the Wyatt family, which are all these big, gigantic, terrifying dudes. And he was just a great, great character that I remember when he came out in 2013, going into 2014, he was just one of the most terrifying characters in the history of the company. He had an awesome theme song, the way he would come out with the lantern, and thousands of wrestling fans would be throwing up the fireflies. It was just such a cool experience. Until John Cena buried him, which was fucking insane. But obviously, after years and years and years, it would eventually lead to him reinventing the character, and Wyndham came up with this idea for this new character, this Firefly Funhouse, and I remember when this debuted, I believe in 2019, and we began to see these vignettes of Bray Wyatt hosting like a Mr. Rogers show for kids, and it was one of the most creative things ever. This is at a time in 2019 where I was kind of becoming detached from wrestling. It just wasn't as good as it had been in recent memory. And getting back into it, really, that sort of happened for me because of this Firefly Funhouse thing. Every single week, coming back to it, trying to see what Bray Wyatt was going to do next in this event and what it was leading to. And what did it lead to? This! The Fiend is one of the craziest, creepiest, and most wild things in the history of professional wrestling. I can't describe to you how awesome it was seeing this for the first time and just how creepy it was. And the documentary breaks down the whole creative process that Bray Wyatt went through, bringing the Fiend to life and kind of his ideas for it, and how he was able to reinvent himself. I always think some of the best keys in life, if you are an artist, is you have to invent yourself. You have to invent an image, a story, whatever it is. If you're an actor, characteristics for your characters. You have to invent skills for yourselves. And once those skills have been used to the point where you can't really go anywhere new with it, you have to reinvent yourself yet again. The people who succeed in life are people that are willing to continuously reinvent who they are and what they do. And Bray Wyatt, it had become stale. The character had become stale, and he reinvented the Bray Wyatt character into the Fiend, and it became something so big and so huge and so amazing that just nobody could look away. And it was one of the biggest and best things in wrestling until Goldberg buried him. What the fuck, WWE? You buried him for years, and we're not going to ignore it, even though the documentary kind of did. You buried this man for years. I blame it on you know who. Thou who shall not be named anymore because he might have been sex trafficking people in the company. You know who it is, right?
Who? What was his name? Huh?
And the documentary covered when Bray Wyatt was actually fired from the company and how miserable he was, but also how he kind of found a purpose, spending time with his family, with his brother, and how he was actually genuinely happy. And the thing that this documentary does really well is highlighting just how wonderful of a soul this guy is. And I think that's what documentaries do best, is when they can actually connect you with the people or the subject matter that it's actually covering and really humanize it in a way that you feel like you're sitting with the person, or you're sitting with the family of the person, and you're actually getting to know who they were. And Bray Wyatt, because he was this very meta character, he was this very supernatural character, the audience never really got to know Wyndham Rotunda in the same way they got to know other wrestlers, right? We always felt like there was something in between us and the real person, and that thing in between was the character. And that was done on purpose because obviously, as a creative mind, he wanted to keep the allure of Bray Wyatt alive. He wanted to keep kayfabe, which is something that doesn't really happen in the industry anymore. But through this documentary, you could see, man, this was a loving father. He was a good husband. He was a good son, a good big brother. And that's what kind of made this whole thing so heartbreaking, especially when you see this in-between time when he was not working with WWE and his creative genes just kind of went off and he wanted to create new stuff with his brother and his family. And it was so heartbreaking, but so sort of motivating in a way. And then eventually Bray Wyatt obviously returned to WWE, and if you watch the show, you know how that return went. It was one of the coolest returns in WWE history. They had been setting it up with these very, very cool Easter eggs and also these weird vignettes that most people thought were kind of alluding to Bray Wyatt coming back, but some people were skeptical. Maybe it's something else. But of course, at Extreme Rules, a pay-per-view, he came back, and this documentary outlines the fact that it was one of the most emotional and amazing moments of his life, and how cool the moment actually was building up to it, how much creative input he had in it, and it was just such an informative, motivating, and beautiful part of this documentary. It felt like building up to this monumental moment of satisfaction, and I remember watching it live, and I loved it, and I remember watching it here in this documentary, and it was just beautiful. And then, of course, the documentary outlines and shows us the classic, and now iconic, it's one of the greatest promos ever, that Bray Wyatt cut the night after he returned, where he went to the ring, and just as Wyndham Rotunda just cut a promo about himself and how much he loved the crowd. I mean, just take a look at some of this.
Sit here right now today, and I can look all of you in the eyes, and I can say that you were there when I was weak, when I was vulnerable, when I was down. So I just wanted to say thank you. You all saved my life.
It's one of the most beautiful promos ever. I mean, it earns a certified Joe Marchione tier pretty much every time I see it. And that was pretty much it. I mean, Bray Wyatt went on a little bit of a run. He was building some sort of story with Uncle Howdy. This character is played by Bo Dallas, his brother. He was building up to something that was probably going to come to a head at WrestleMania, but as we all know, Bray got COVID, he got sick, and then the documentary outlines how it just all kind of came to an end. Bray just went to bed one day, and that was it. He passed away, and honestly, it's one of the saddest and most tragic things I've ever seen. It is something that's very relevant to our world, to us, to everybody, because listen, life is very fragile, right? Everybody knows this. If you don't know it, you better get used to knowing it, because it's a very fragile thing, and this happens sometimes in life, and it is just atrocious in this circumstance. And the documentary goes into real heartbreaking and heart-wrenching and devastating detail of the day that it happened and how the family reacted. And it's very real, it's very organic, and it's one of the most heart-crushing parts of a documentary I've ever seen. And documentaries are always, I watched the one from last year, the Oscar-winning one about Ukraine, which is as real as it gets when it comes to outlining death and destruction. So, I'm used to watching documentaries that just ground us in as much reality as possible. But seeing and hearing the rawness of this person who is so big and made such a big part of my life watching wrestling, and hearing this story of how he was just gone, it was one of the most emotional moments for me personally watching a documentary. It earned another certified Joe Marchione tier, I'm not going to lie. It earned a few, if I'm going to be honest. It earned maybe even 4. It earned a lot of Joe Marchione certified tiers. But it was a situation that's just, they kept showing other wrestlers, Seth Rollins, Kevin Owens, all the other people talking about in this documentary, Sami Zayn, how it still doesn't feel real. Like they're waiting for the day that they're going to be at an event and his music's going to hit and he's going to come out and it's like, oh yeah, he's back, and obviously he's not gone. And it's still one of those things that I think it's been about 6 months. It's just weird. It's weird that this guy's gone. It doesn't feel like it. And I think the whole world is still just, of the wrestling world, is still trying to accept it. Yet again, I compare it to when Eddie Guerrero died. When Eddie Guerrero died, he was young, he was in, the prime of his career, and it just sort of happened. And I think the whole wrestling world kind of freezed, and I'm still not sure, even it's been almost 20 years, or it might have been 20 years, I don't think the wrestling world has really moved on from that. And then, of course, soon after that, you had the Benoit stuff, and it's just, these things just happen sometimes, and this one was a really tough one, and it was tough to sort of swallow watching this documentary. But then WWE does a very smart thing in this documentary. They outline what made Wyndham matter the most, his creative genes, and they show you this outfit for the Fiend, this character of the Fiend that he was going to be bringing back at some point, and he never got to, but just outlined one last time how creative he was and how he sort of merged his family within his work. And it got me again, another certified Joe Marchione tier. Overall, this is probably the best documentary that WWE's ever produced. It's one that's fitting for WrestleMania week, and one that I think everybody, if you're a wrestling fan, or even if you're just loosely interested in the wrestling world, should go check it out. It's worth your 2 hours. It's one of the best produced documentaries I've seen in a while. It's extremely emotional, and it outlines the life of this guy who should have been here still today, and is honestly one of the most creative people to ever work in this industry, and was buried by WWE one too many times because some guy with a V in his name was just not a very good dude. And of course, the documentary ends with a tease of Bo Dallas coming back as Uncle Howdy, which I'm a little mixed on. A part of me feels like, yes, the legacy needs to be carried on. Bo Dallas is a very talented man in himself, in his own right, and I think it will be cool to see him come back and sort of live out that legacy and hopefully do it the right way and do it amazingly. But then another part of me is like, is it too soon? Is it too soon to be doing this? And I don't know, but I guess I think the proper way to handle this would be, listen, if his family thinks it's time and his family thinks it's time to carry on the legacy and do this, then who the hell is anybody else to say they're wrong, right? Who else? Who is it my place to say they're wrong? No, obviously not. That would be atrocious. If they think it's time, then I'm here for it. WWE's been amazing so far, and I look forward to seeing how they're going to incorporate the Bray Wyatt world and Bo Dallas going forward. It should be interesting. But I'll give this documentary a 5 out of 5. I mean, I can't really give it anything else. It earns like 20 certified Joe Marchione tiers. So yeah, that's a win. So what do you guys think of it? What do you guys think of this video? Please make sure to subscribe, turn on notifications, leave a comment down below, and I will see you guys in the next one.